Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Welcome to a brand new video. In today's video, I'd like to share with you some of the books in my library that I think would definitely benefit every one of you, and inshallah. And the only purpose I'm doing this, first and foremost, is not so that you would get these literatures. You definitely wouldn't want to get all of the literatures that I will show you today, but it is more of something that if you're really interested in doing the research as someone that just do this as a hobby, and so hopefully this video will benefit you. Now, I will be recommending study Bible today, one volume study Bible, as well as one volume commentary from both sides, from the evangelical side as well as from the historical critical side, if you get what I mean. And the reason why I'm presenting from two angles here is because a lot of the videos that I watch on YouTube, they only recommend from one side. So for example, when I watch evangelical videos, they recommend the evangelical, so-called evangelical devotional literatures. And when I'm actually watching videos of people that are actually non-Christians and they do not actually believe that there's such thing as God, so on and so forth, they would always lean more towards interviewing scholars that are non-evangelical, non-devotional, and they interview scholars that are atheists, that are against Christianity, so to speak, so on and so forth. And so there's no really objective here. The objectivity here has been diminished because one side will argue, and then some of this side will misrepresent the other side's arguments, so on and so forth, or have not really understood the argument properly, so on and so forth. So in my channel here, I try to avoid all of that. No doubt we have to recognize our bias. We will have biases. And so the best thing for us to do is to recognize these biases and try to present material as fairly as possible. So for example, when we present that the historical critical method is superior, we have to prove why it is superior, and we also have to present the argument from the evangelical side, from the devotional side, so on and so forth. And we see this the same way. We see this in people making videos against Judaism, against Islam, against Hinduism, in all sorts of areas. They do not actually appeal or have not read the literatures from the other camp, the people that they disagree with. Mostly they've heard their arguments here and there, but they've not actually explored the entire argument and try to think, why do these people actually believe what they believe? Why do they come to that conclusion, so to speak, right? And so a lot of the videos that I've watched, unfortunately, only present materials from one side. I used to do that as well. I used to make videos presenting materials just from the historical critical side, but that doesn't mean that I don't read evangelical literatures on the sides and not make videos about it, right? But recently I've been making videos to present kind of both materials here and there, the same way, objectively. And in future videos, I'll try to move away from actually making a conclusion. Instead, I want to present the audience with materials from both sides and let the audience decide for themselves. But that doesn't mean that I will not present I will not present my point of view as to why I disagree, as to why I agree, right? Because that is the purpose of this channel. But nevertheless, I will not tell anyone to go to this side or go to that side. You guys have to make your own conclusion. And so, first things first, it's better if I shift this camera here, much closer. So, hopefully you can see here. Right. I'll have to move some stuff around. Okay. So as you can see, these are my shelves full of one volume biblical commentaries. Right. So these are one volume biblical commentaries. You can see. One volume biblical commentaries are there. And this is my Anchor Bible commentaries, and I have Hermeneia commentaries as well. And so this is also the New Cambridge Bible commentaries. And here are some literatures, for example, so on and so forth, but not for this video. So, for example, you guys have seen me use the Moody Bible commentary, and these are the following literatures I will present are evangelical, devotional literatures. When I say devotional, that doesn't mean that they do not think critically. All literatures are written critically. It's just that they are written critically from a devotional perspective. So the Moody Bible commentary, this is something that I would consult when I want to know the evangelical argument, the devotional argument. Because this is fair, because it also presents material from two sides. Even though it has its theological inclination, but it doesn't stop the authors from presenting actually historical facts and so forth, and actually caution the readers as to why you shouldn't apply Trinitarian theology to this sort of passage and so forth. So this cautions the readers as well. For example, in Deuteronomy 6:4, a lot of Christians study Bible, a lot of devotional study Bible. They actually read back the doctrine of the Trinity into Deuteronomy 6:4, the Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Right? They read back into the Shema. But this study Bible actually say that it is highly likely that the Shema, right, doesn't represent the Trinity, or one should not read the Trinity into the Shema. In fact, let me just read it directly from here. Right, so I can read to you the entire passage. For those of you who don't know the Shema is the Jewish creed. Right? It's just like the Islamic Tawheed creed. And so Deuteronomy 6:4, Jews would recite Deuteronomy 6:4 twice a day when they wake up and before they go to sleep. So this is one of the key verses in the entire Old Testament. It has been designated the Shema, which comes from the Hebrew word hear. Okay. The summons for Israel to hear is stated here for the second time in the book. The first time is 5:1. And clearly is meant to cause the nation to pay strict attention and obey the instruction of this passage. This verse is the core credo statement of Judaism, yet it is challenging to translate because of the number of ways in which the Hebrew can be understood. The first word can be interpreted as either a predicate statement, okay, qualitative, the Lord is our God, okay, or as a nominal phrase, the Lord our God. Right? The predicated statement is unlikely here since the clause, the Lord is our God, is not likely to be understood that way in any of the 21 uses of our book. Right? So that means the Lord is an entity, and this entity is the God of Israel. Right? So this is unlikely, meaning this person is the God of Israel. Right? So it is unlikely to be used in this form. The real crux is whether the last word in the verse is to be translated as an adjective, one. Okay? The Lord is one. Or as an adverb, alone, the Lord alone. The JBS has the translation alone. Okay? Either translation is possible, and perhaps this is a rare instance of intentional ambiguity to allow for both notions. The wording, however it is translated, would imply monotheism. Right? Strict monotheism, I would argue for. And other passages in Deuteronomy support that notion as well. If it is an adjective, one, then this would allow for the doctrine of the Trinity, since elsewhere in the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of Moses, the Hebrew word echad can designate a compound unity, as in the case of two people, like Adam and Eve. Okay, Adam and Eve being one, okay, in flesh, for example, or being one flesh. In light, this is Genesis 2:24. in light of the immediate context of in Deuteronomy 6:4 or Deuteronomy 6, it may be better to take the last word as an adverb. Okay? The Ten Commandments clearly call for the worship of God alone. Okay? Not God as one, but God alone. Meaning you cannot worship other God. And so, and verses in the immediate context elaborate further on worshiping Him exclusively for His uniqueness. Okay, this is talking about the Tetragrammaton, Yod He Vav He, the Lord of Israel, the God of Israel. Right. Although the doctrine of the Trinity is an important truth, according to the Moody Bible commentators here, it does not seem to be the focus in this bit, in this verse. Right? It does not seem to be the focus in this verse. And so even though this is, Moody Bible, Moody Institute, right? This is the crux of evangelicalism. At least it is honest in its historical survey that this verse most likely, in fact, I would even say that highly, right, is not talking about the doctrine of the Trinity. We will turn to one of the evangelical favorite, the Believer's Bible Commentary. Is also another look at how thick this is. Right, this is also one of the Believer's favorite. That's why it is called the Believer's Bible Commentary. We will turn to test passages. I will review all this book. Right? I will do a separate review of all this book. Right? But this is just to show you one volume commentary. I'll probably do a study Bible in the next episode, inshallah. Right. And so we go to Deuteronomy 6:4. The Believer's Bible Commentary is huge. It is also heavy here. Okay, Deuteronomy 6:4 here. Okay. Verses 4 and 9 are known as the Shema, which is the Hebrew word for hear, and were recited daily as a creed by devout Jews, okay, along with some of the passages. Okay. And the quotation here, the Hebrew word for one in verse 4 is significant. Viewed in the light of the fuller revelation of the New Testament, it stands not for absolute unity, but for compound unity. Okay, this is according to Believer's Study Bible here. And is thus consistent with both the names of God used in this verse. Okay. Jehovah, which is Lord, emphasizes His oneness. Elohim emphasizes His three persons. The same mysterious hints of Trinity in unity occur. Right? The same mysterious hints of Trinity in unity occur in the very first verse of the Bible, where Elohim is followed by a singular verb, created. Okay. And in Genesis 1:26, where the plural pronouns us and our are followed by the singular nouns image and likeness. Okay. And that is all that it says about Deuteronomy 6:4. And so this is the Believer's Study Bible. Right. Up next, I've reviewed Tony Evans. I've not reviewed. I presented Tony Evans' Bible commentary. Okay, just now was Believer's Bible Commentary, wasn't Study Bible, right? Tony Evans' Bible commentary. We will go to Deuteronomy 6:4 and read. Right. One interesting thing that, because I have been blessed with a lot of these literatures, is that I will spend my time actually comparing different passages, comparing different commentaries and notes, with the literatures that I have. Deuteronomy 6:4. These verses are known in Judaism as the Shema, which is the Hebrew word that begins 6:4. It means listen, hear. Moses was calling the people to sit up and take notes on what he was about to say because of how important it was. In fact, Jesus would later call it the greatest and most important command. This is Matthew 22:37 to 39. Moses said, "Listen, Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one." Okay? Then it goes on, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength. In other translation, with all your might. It was vital that the people get this right, because if the Israelites were going to survive and thrive in the promised land, the family unity would have to become the primary place where faith in and love for the Lord was modeled and transferred. Parents are to teach God's commandments and statutes regularly to their children in everyday events of life. It's good for families to read through devotional together and have formal teaching times, but such things need to be combined with the powerful witness of a godly lifestyle that incorporates God's word in each day's routine. Notice how regularly Israel was told to speak of the things of God, right? And this goes on, so on and so forth. For some reason, the English here it's quite terrible. You can literally make the sentences easier, but for some reason the sentences are difficult to read. Up next, we go to the MacArthur Bible Commentary, and then I want to start looking at some historical critical commentaries. The MacArthur Bible Commentaries, Deuteronomy 6:4. Here it is. Right, hear, O Israel. Deuteronomy 6:4 to 9, known as the Shema, the Hebrew word for hear, has become the Jewish confession of faith, recited twice daily by the devout along with some of the passages. The Lord is one. The Lord our God is one, right? The intent of these words was to give a clear statement of the truth of monotheism, that there is only one God. Thus, it has also been translated, the Lord is our God, the Lord alone. The word used for one in this passage does not mean singleness, but unity. The same word is used in Genesis 2:24, where the husband and wife were said to be one flesh. Thus, while this verse was intended as a clear and concise statement of monotheism, it does not exclude the concept of the Trinity. So this is the MacArthur Bible Commentary. Again, I will review. I know I've not reviewed all of this book. It's impossible to review all books, right? And it's also boring to review all books. But this is the MacArthur Bible Commentary, which I use to know what evangelical Christians actually think. Even though some fundamentals believe MacArthur Study Bible is not evangelical. Now, since we are dealing with Deuteronomy 6:4, I will turn to the scholar of the Torah, Richard Elliott Friedman. Right, the scholar of the Torah, Richard Elliott Friedman. Let me just move here closer. Right, the scholar of the Torah, Richard Elliott Friedman. And we're going to turn to Deuteronomy 6:4 here and see what this scholar has to say. This is from a historical, critical perspective. Okay, here we go. This is Deuteronomy. Right, Deuteronomy 6:4. Listen. Okay. Forms of this word, Hebrew, Shema, occurs about 80 times in Deuteronomy. Okay, in Deuteronomy, it occurs 80 times. This emphasis on listening goes together with the title and theme of the book, okay, which is words, Moses' speech. The great events of creation, patriarchs, Exodus, Sinai, and the wilderness are at an end. What remains now is the words, the story of what happened, and the commandments to be fulfilled. Israel's task now and in the future generation is to listen. Okay. to learn the story and to do the commandments. And so this passage, probably the most commonly known and frequently repeated words in the Bible by Jews, begins with the commandment that necessarily precedes all others, that is to listen. Okay. Yahweh is one, or Yod-Heh-Waw-Heh, the tetragrammaton. But just to emphasize here, Orthodox Jews, or in fact Jews in general, found it offensive if someone were to pronounce the name of God. Right, and so they would substitute it to Adonai. Okay, so 6.4, Yod-Heh-Waw-Heh is one. This is a supremely monotheistic statement. Supremely monotheistic statement, especially when taken together with the preceding statements. He is God and there is no outside of him. And there isn't another. More evidence that monotheism is essential in Deuteronomy. In its early pre-exilic layers will follow. Monotheism was an early concept in biblical Israel. Some take these words to mean Yod-Heh-Waw-Heh is our God, Yod-Heh-Waw-Heh alone. But alone is an extremely uncommon meaning for the Hebrew word here, which is echad. Right? And so this Elliot Friedman disagree with the Moody Bible commentators here. Yahweh is one. Okay, Yod-Heh-Waw-Heh is one. In comparing Israel's monotheism to pagan religion, we must appreciate that the difference between one and many is not the same sort of thing as the difference between 2 and 3 or between 6 and 20. It is not numerical, right? So it is not numerical. It is a different concept of what a God is, right? Because if you look at the MacArthur Study Bible and the Believer Study Bible, they are trying to allude this to numerical, whereby one is not necessarily numerical one. Okay, it's not necessarily a compound. It's not necessarily a singleness. Right? It is a compound one, right? As we've surveyed the literatures, the 3 literatures before this. A God who is outside of nature, known through acts in history, a creator unseeable without a mate, who makes legal covenants with humans, who is one, is a revolution in religious conception. Okay? Meaning this is unlike all the other gods, unlike all the other Canaanite deities, right? Because the context here is the Deuteronomies, right? They were probably writing after the Ezra Nehemiah period, right? Meaning the post-exilic period, or some argues before, or it cannot be during, right? So, but most probably after or before, right? Depending on which camp you actually take, right? I believe it's after, right? But scholar debates on this, and so Richard Elliot Friedman here emphasized that without a mate. Let me just show you. Without a mate, meaning there's no Trinity. There's no sharing of the persons of Godhead, such thing like that. There's no such thing. Right? So this is commentary on the Torah. Commentary on the Torah. Right? This is just the Torah, by the way. Right? And so this is from a Jewish scholar. We will look at just one literature. We will look at the Harper Bible commentaries. HarperCollins Bible commentary. Okay. Again, I've used this book before in a lot of my videos, and you can check out those videos. But again, I will do a review of all these books, inshallah, in the future. It takes time. We'll go to Deuteronomy 6:4 here. Okay. One great thing about the HarperCollins Study Bible is that it has a lot of great articles in the beginning. Okay. And so this is, I'm at the wrong page. Right. Let me just show you here. It doesn't go through like verse by verse. It goes through like portions of text. Okay, portions of text. And then the next text you read is a different text already. It's a different portion of text. Right. So the essence of the law. I'm going to skip to where it says here. The Lord is one, okay, and therefore has no doubleness or purpose or intention. Such a God and only such a God is worthy of total obedience. If we go a few sentences, God's own nature motivates obedience as well. The Lord is God alone, unique in power with a sole claim on Israel's loyalty, unlike Baal or Baal, right, who was manifested at scores of local high places around the country. The one true God has only one true place of worship, right? And so this argues against the Trinity, the doctrine of the Trinity, and so it is in support of the Moody Bible commentators. So, ladies and gentlemen, we could go on, and I'll probably dedicate another video or so to discussing critical biblical commentaries and also to discussing study Bible. And also in the future, inshallah, we will do like one volume commentary. We're going to read from the text and so forth. Right now, I'm going to research into areas of mimesis criticism. Right? Mimesis criticism is something that I have been doing and researching at the sites. I've not really made videos about that because I'm still not convinced of mimesis story of the gospel, so on and so forth. But I do have literatures, for example, M. David Litois, How the Gospel Became History, so on and so forth. Right. Also Dennis MacDonald, a lot of literatures by Dennis MacDonald. For example, this one, his latest work, Synopsis of Epic Tragedy and Gospels. Right, and so this contains a lot of his lifelong research. And so I can't wait to get into areas of mimesis criticism because it is something that I'm exploring, right? Obviously, Dennis MacDonald and M. David Litois are the two giants known in this field. But if you check out the bibliographies, there's a lot of predecessors before them, right? And also, my area of research that I'm expanding on is also to include much later Christian era. For example, my research so far has been between the first, up until the Council of Chalcedon, right? Also the Second Council of Nicaea, right? So I would like to expand the research areas much further towards the advent of Islam. So that is something that I will be pursuing because my area of interest has always been early Christianity, ancient Judaism, and so on and so forth. And I'm also expanding my research to like the ancient Near East and more towards the subcontinent as well. And inshallah, you've not seen this part of my library. Right? I've never reviewed books in here, right? But in here it contains a lot of books that are pertaining to the history of Islam. If you've been following me from IGTV, you know that I used to make a lot of videos on Islamic history. Right? And so, for example, we have the Mughal Empire, Aurangzeb Alamgir, right? And so this is something that I'm interested in as well. Right, the Mughal dynasty, the history of Islam in the subcontinent is something that is an area of favorite. The Umayyad dynasty, the Abbasid dynasty, in Central Asia as well, the Kharijites, okay, the early Islam, so on and so forth. And so all these areas, inshallah, I will look to make videos, look to expand. But just so you know, I started interested in all this, or started making videos actually not about comparative religion. It's about Islamic history. Right? So the Lost Enlightenment is a great book. It's a great book that talks about the success of Islam in Central Asia. And also we have Jonathan Phillips, The Life Legend of Sultan Saladin. Right? It is something. This book is in 2 parts. I've not read the second part because the second part is how Saladin or Salahuddin al-Ayyubi actually influenced people of the modern generation. The first part is more about his biography, so on and so forth. And not only that, I'm also interested in the argument of atheism versus religion, and how atheism doesn't make sense or how religion doesn't make sense, right? So one of my favorite professor of physicists is actually Lawrence Krauss. Universe from nothing, right? But it's actually not universe from nothing, right? He don't believe that the universe was created from nothing, like poop, it was created, right? There's always something in the beginning. So when people say the universe from nothing, it doesn't actually mean from literally nothing. Also, Lawrence of Arabia, I have his autobiography, Lawrence of Arabia, 7 Pillars of Wisdom. Right. And also the early Islamic history, Usama ibn Munkith, Ibn Battuta, so on and so forth. Travels of Ibn Battuta, right? Small one so I can keep inside my pocket. But my favorite book, if you read the description of this channel, right? My favorite book is actually this. Oh, I think it is this. I've read this many times. Babur Nama, Memoirs of Babur, Prince and Emperor. Now, this is my favorite book. Right? Babur was the first Mughal emperor. He came from Kabul, or he came from Fergana Valley, right? Because he shift here and there. His father passed away after his house collapsed down the ravine, and so he was left to fend his territory for himself. And so he lost the territory, and so he went around the Fergana Valley, so on and so forth. And he would travel on boats while smoking opium, doing weed, we call it today, right? Doing all these intoxicant. And then he would write about how he was a sinner, so on and so forth. But he would also write about how God would, have mercy on him. And so, even though he wasn't a really great example of a Muslim, right? But one thing that really struck me is that he always believed that God is merciful, which is true because Allah SWT is the most merciful, right? And so, if you read his memoirs, you will know that there's an event whereby their whole tent was actually flooded, right? And so he would spend the next few days drying his manuscripts, right? And he wrote this in the Chagatai language, which is a dead language, right? And then later on, most probably, his great-grandson or his grandson or later generation would actually compile all these manuscripts, right? And currently, the critical edition that we have of the Babur Nama goes back to the 18th century, if I'm not mistaken, but we do not have the autograph. Obviously, Babur passed away in 1530, if I'm not mistaken. Right. Yeah, 1530 he passed away. So Babur is my favorite book, Babur Nama, especially the William Thaxton translation. Another one is the India in Personate Age, Richard Eaton. This is the Penguin edition. You can get the University of Chicago Press edition as well, which is much easier to read. right? But desecration of Hindu temples wasn't a Muslim phenomenon, right? The Ghurids did not do it first. It was actually the Cholas who came, and basically to put it to put the whole scene straight, is whereby Hindus would desecrate each other's temple, because when they destroy the idols of the temple, it means that God is no longer with the people of that temple, right? Because God has deserted them, because God allows their idols, right, to be destroyed. So, and so this goes about the dynasty um, from 1000 to 1765, right? And so there's a lot of areas that I'm interested in that I do not actually make videos, or I used to make videos. But, if you actually scroll down to my oldest video, I think I still have the video about the history of Islam, the complete history of Islam, from the inception all the way to modern time. The Muqaddimah, the introduction by Ibn Khaldun, great. It talks about the social history of the early Bedouins, the Arabs, and because of this book, we understood a lot about the early culture of the Arabs, so on and so forth. Also, one of my area of interest is the northern Arabian tribes, and archaeology has not explored this area as well, right? Because Saudi Arabia used to be a closed country. It is not until recently, within the past 2 or 3 years or so, whereby and now we're going to have peace treaty, inshallah, between Saudi Arabia and Israel, right? So it allows a lot of excavation works to be done, and so because there are oases that actually have inscription, right? Writings of the early Arabic script or Semitic script, for example, right? So all these oases have not been explored. And so this area between Israel or Palestine and Saudi Arabia, this area, this northern Arabian area, the northern Arabian desert, right? When Apostle Paul, we call it desert, right? But he would go to actually by the Jordan area. Those areas are also called Arabia, right? Because the Romans do not actually go down south. They do not travel through the Arabian desert because, I mean, what's the point, right? They're going to die. So these areas have not been tapped into by archaeologists, right? They actually have the expertise, mostly Western archaeologists. And so there's a lot of other books, the Ottomans, so on and so forth. The Preaching of Islam, okay, TWA, Thomas Walker Arnold. Let me just show you this. Right, The Preaching of Islam. Right. And so I also have a book from Joseph Priestley about the corruption of the Bible. But anyway, and so we have a lot of literatures here about the Muslim Spain, Islamic Spain, so on and so forth. And so these are all areas that I'm interested in. But these are more areas that I'm interested in reading during my free time and not really make videos of, right? But inshallah, in the future, I will make video of all this history, because there's a lot of wealth. The Islamic history is rich. There's a lot of wealth in Islamic history. The Arabic language actually changes the whole European civilization. It begins with the Arabic language. It changed the entire European civilization. Because there is a book on that one, right? Because if it wasn't for the Muslims in Central Asia, right, first, who translated all, actually it's not they were not Muslims, they became Muslims later on, and they were Christians who translated these Greek literatures, right, into the Arabic language. If it wasn't, and then later on, Europe when the House of Wisdom was established throughout the Islamic land, right, by the 12th, 13th century, Europeans would actually read the Greek literatures, right? They will read Aristotle, Plato, so on and so forth. But these works were actually lost because they were not copied by Christian monks. Christian monks spent a lot of their time copying New Testament and New Testament manuscripts, right? Copying the Bible. They do not like, because the Catholic Church decree that even though it wasn't enforced, the Catholic Church decree that back then, not today, right? Back then, the Catholic Church decree that it is actually not permissible or advisable to actually read literatures that goes against the Bible, right? Literatures that contains different teachings apart from the Bible, they're frowned upon, right? But people still read it, right? They will go to the Islamic land, they will read it, so on and so forth. And that's what happened. People actually study in these houses of wisdom. We call it the university and so on and so forth, but it's not really a university, right? Like learning centers, for and so forth, because it can be held in a masjid, whereby people will sit in groups and then they will just listen, just like the philosophers in Athens, in Corinth, for example, right? They would actually listen, they will actually debate, so on and so forth, and so they will have patrons, they have pupils, so on and so forth. And scholars were actually given supplements or monthly salary by the Abbasid governments to just produce works like Shanami, Ferdowsi, for example, though he wasn't paid. So there's a lot of history here. But obviously this channel has grown into more of a comparative religion kind of channel, or more towards the Muslim bibliophile kind of channel. But it is also something that I'm thinking about bringing Islamic history into this channel as well, because a lot of Muslims do not actually know their own history. And it is actually early Muslims, geographers, early Muslims, travelers, Ibn Battuta, Ibn Jubair, Ibn Khaldun, right? Ar-Razi, Fakhruddin Ar-Razi, all these great people. The Islamic civilization, they were advanced at one stage. They excel in poetry, they excel in philosophy, right? Even though a lot of people would claim the Mu'tazila to be heretics, but the Mu'tazila, the rationalists, right, they're also philosophers who are top great philosophers, right? And so, although they're also heretic, like I wouldn't call them heretic. Other people call these people heretics, like Averroes, Ibn Sina, right? Umar Khayyam, for example, the great, the one that discovered optics, if I'm not mistaken. And so there's a lot of all these great scholars that people actually, the Muslims, do not actually know of, are not aware of, because there's not a lot of videos that actually talk about Islamic history. There are a lot of videos that talk about Islamic history, that critiques Islamic history, because these channels are widely available, right? There's only a few channels that talks about Islamic history, that focuses on Islamic history, and also focuses on comparative religion. So this is something that I've been thinking I might incorporate, but this is not something new, because if you have been following me from IGTV, you know that I started out talking about Islamic history. And so there's a lot of things. There's also a lot of comparative religion literatures. For example, Islam and Christianity. Islam and Christianity. I have the Muslim Jesus here, Hadith, or sayings of Islam, or Islamic text that actually goes and talk about Isa ibn Maryam alayhi salam, like Muslim Jesus here. Right. And I also have a lot of literatures that are ancient Judaism, Jewish law, practices of Judaism, introduction to introduction to the Hebrew Bible, and also have a lot of quite a couple of Greek and Hebrew literatures as well. Introduction to the New Testament, and the Old Testament, introduction to the Bible, and so these are all interesting literatures. I've not read all of them, definitely, right? But I've used, I would say, about 80% of them as reference, right? One of the great book that I definitely within my top 15 or top 20 is Sir Anthony Buzzard's and Charles F. Hunting, The Doctrine of the Trinity, Christianity's Self-Inflicted Wound. I made videos about this book in the past. This book goes into, it's more like a commentary or reinterpretation or different way to read the text, definitely historically more accurate than the Trinitarian view. And I also am very interested in going to, I've been also researching on Eastern Christianity. This is a basic guide to the Eastern Orthodox theology. One great thing that I found that are closest to Islam is actually not Protestantism. A lot of people thought it is the Protestant because they are Reformed, right? And so they do not accept the papacy. They do not. They are more like the Muslims who reject, right, the Ahmadi, right, the Ahmadi sect or the Ahmadi religion, right? Because some people would declare the Ahmadi as heretics. They are not part of Islam. So it makes no sense to call the Ahmadi a sect of Islam, right? So the Ahmadi religion, right? And so Ahmadiyya is more like the Catholic of Protestant, right? Because they accept the papacy, they accept the Pope is infallible, just like the Ahmadi who accept their Anbiya after the Prophet ﷺ, and these are infallible, right? It's just like the Shia who accept their Imams, right? The 12 Shia, right? The Ismaili and the Zaydis, right? And so they accept their Imams, and so Sunni Muslims reject, right? There's no infallible Imams. There's only Imam Mahdi, but it's not the Imam Mahdi of the Shia, right? And so also about Sufism, right? Sufism, Zuhud is part of Islam, but not all those Sufis who jumps around in the masjid, so on and so forth, right? So all these are areas that I research. And there's a book that I read here, just not a book, a small pamphlet, if I can get this. It's about Tawheed. So this small pamphlet is actually fantastic. I'll show you two pamphlets here. They are small books, actually. Right. The Purification of Tawheed from the Filth of Deviation. A very small book, but a very, very impactful book. It talks about the different shirk, right? What is major sin, and what is major shirk, what is minor shirk. And for example, it talks about ibadah. Like if you make dua, what are the conditions of making dua? For example, like if you make dua to a dead person, not for, right? To a dead person, that is shirk, right? Because the dead person doesn't have the ability to help you, right? Doesn't have the ability, the dead person doesn't even know its fate, right? And the other one is the beliefs of the Sufis and Ahlul Sunnah, right? And so great pamphlet, but sometimes you read a 1,000-page book, but it says nothing. Whereas when you read just a small pamphlet like this, a small book, about 50 pages or so, but it talks a lot. It talks a lot, right? It is not like an empty tin. When you knock it, it makes the loudest sound. But when you open it, there's no cookie inside. Also, the wives of the Prophet, right? The mother of the Muslim. The wives of the Prophet. This is by Darussalam, by the way. And these are all the peoples that we should know, but unfortunately, including myself, we neglect knowing all these people. The Timeless Seeds of Advice, a great book of advice. I've read from this before on camera, and no doubt I will continue reading. Oh, this is The Choice by Ahmad Didat. Definitely very powerful speaker. May Allah have mercy on his soul. And he's done so much. He's done so much. There's a lot of Islamic literatures here. Since we're here, I can just show you some of them. The necessity of hadith in Islam. Now, there are hadith rejectors. Right? There are hadith rejectors out there. The necessity of hadith in Islam. Right? If we reject hadiths, we have basically reject the Quran. Right? Because how are we going to make salah? So how are we going to, why do we pray Maghrib 3 rakat and not 5 or 10? Right? Because of hadith. And so the disease of the heart and their cures by Shaykhul Islam Ibn Taymiyyah. Definitely one of the great scholars. There's a book that I have here by a lot of you who know and enjoy philosophy would know that this is the master philosopher here. Right? And we're not talking about heretic philosopher. We're talking about the people that actually believe in the Quran. Right? And they can also be philosophers. Right? There's nothing wrong in becoming a philosopher and writing about philosophy. Right? And so a lot of people today, they would say that, oh, you're a philosopher, you're this, and it always has a negative connotation towards that. Right? Whereas there's nothing wrong in becoming a philosopher or expound some philosophies, right? A lot of people don't know what philosophy is. Right? Philosophy is difficult, but it's difficult to talk to these people. That's what I meant, right? Because they don't even know what philosophy is. And so, ladies and gentlemen, I could go on and on, but hopefully these few literatures that I've shared with you, and hopefully a few description of these books would actually tickle your interest and would actually get you to start reading, because it is difficult to read. A lot of us do not have the time to read, but we have to make sacrifices if we want to achieve something, right? Because knowledge doesn't come easy. Even watching videos, you will get a lot of knowledge. Right? So, but if you really want to go deeper into a specific field, then you would definitely want to start reading books. I'll arrange my library later. I'll end this video. My name is Arfat. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.